Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask what moves us, or more accurately, what's going to move us in future.
With the Rail Innovation Group's Johannah and Liam Henderson, we look at debates, themes, and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future.
Hi, I'm Deb, and I'm here with the Rail Innovation Group, woohoo, to do another podcast.
And I'm Liam.
And I'm Johannah in Scotland.
Well, Deb's all
Deb, where are you?
She's where are you, Deb?
I'm in Portugal at the moment. I'm working from Portugal, and it's very nice and good Wi-Fi so far, such wood, so that's all right.
And almost as sunny as the Highlands.
It's lovely and sunny. Yes, it's quite warm and sunny here. It's been like that since I got here. It's been about 20. It's quite cold at night, but it's about 22 degrees in the day, sunny.
And have you used any public transport while you've been there?
No, because there is none where I am. I was going to try and get a train to somewhere near here from Lisbon, and my friend said, I wouldn't bother, we'll come and pick you up in the car. And I have looked at all the bus stops, but I've never seen a bus in this village. There are bus stops, but I'm yet to see an actual bus. So, yeah, I don't think Portugal is very well known for its rail, I have to say.
I think, though, it does have a good rail service.
I think it does, but I think it's quite limited. I think it's fairly limited.
One strip,
I understand. Yeah. Probably a lot to do with the sort of geography and the geology of the place, because it is quite mountain. Well, not exactly mountainous. I don't know what the definition of a mountain is, but it's quite the terrain is quite challenging, I would imagine, and also it's very underpopulated, Portugal, apart from around the edges,
Well, that was what I was thinking, is it's featured around sort of like its populations, because I don't, you'd probably call it, although it's not a complete intercity network, you would call it an intercity network, even though some of the services would reflect a regional style service. So I'd sort of like, think of it sort of like almost a bit like a mixture of some intercity along the coast and some of it a bit sort of like almost like a Southwest Trains type operation, where it's serving some smaller regional areas. But as I recall, when I lived there in the 90s, it was quite efficient and quite cheap. But they have made announcements for expanding their network, and they're building a high speed network between Porto and Lisbon, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think they are expanding bits of it, and like I say, I think, to be honest, it strikes me it's more of a sort of country where you'd need an inter-urban buses would probably be the answer here, not building loads more rail in those kind of areas. And as I say, I haven't seen any buses as yet, so there's quite people do tend to drive, but it doesn't, like I say, they're quite sparsely populated, or once you come inland. So yeah.
Right. Well, good topic to be talking about abroad, because some of the things we want to talk about today were about our year ahead, which includes us going to quite a few conferences around Europe to talk about various aspects of transport. So just the three things that I'm going to mention, which we can talk about, which I have been asked to focus on this year, which is using data for climate resilience, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Two is creating data from current operations. I assume that's to do with the marketplace. Number three is accessing overseas opportunities, because surprise, surprise, some people are struggling to thrive in the Great British rail market, but are having much more success abroad, and so they're focusing their activities abroad.
That's interesting. That third one, have you got any kind of have you got any more detailed insight into that?
I don't, because you've yet to do that as one of your initiatives as head of initiative.
Oh, very funny.
I was going to say, I think that anecdotally, whilst we haven't done a data collection, we know a lot of our members have been doing, work abroad. Obviously, Liam, you've done work abroad in the last 18 months, because you were supporting one of our members in there working for the Qatar World Cup.
Yes. And actually, I did another project just before Christmas in Oman.
And I would say in terms of rail work, I don't think I've done anything in the UK for 2 years.
And you've been talking
Yeah.
about the Middle East as well. You've been doing work in the Middle East.
I've been doing a lot of work in the Middle East. So it must be just you, Deb, doing lots of work in the UK because of your support with high speed rail.
Yes, and obviously that's an interesting one. We've given the government's decision in October because I've been talking to lots of people that work in construction and infrastructure on HS2, and companies that would have been expecting to expand out into phase 2A, phase 2B of that project and beyond, because that was always going to be the wide network that was going to then create opportunities for good connections into Scotland, into Wales, into, potentially the southwest. And that's all been sort of thrown into somewhat disarray, really. So I suppose everyone's been sort of desperately trying to work through what the government's new plan is, which was obviously the Network North stuff, and then seeing where there might be opportunities in that, which has been quite difficult because it's such a sort of bodged together plan, really, that it took about a month for the government to actually weed out the things that they realised they'd already built, and etc etc. I won't rerun that old argument, but it is a bit of a challenge. I saw that the Rail Freight Group did an article in was it Rail Magazine? I can't remember. I think it was Rail Magazine yesterday, talking about where are the opportunities for freight going to be, given that one of the biggest reasons, firmly in the business case for building more high speed, such as high speed 2, was to get more freight opportunities. And obviously her members, Maggie Smith's members, are extremely concerned about the fact that sort of early analysis shows that Network North doesn't look like it's really going to provide those kind of opportunities.
I think, and you'll know more about this, Deb, because I think the whole point about going overseas is that there's quite a really, I mean, there's within that decision, and also people going overseas, there's some quite serious issues at play there, because on the one hand, one of the things that, as people who supply into rail industry, whether you're a startup, an SME, or a tier one supplier, is that everyone's always talking about the security of the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody's starting to look abroad because because of the uncertainty and cancellation in projects in the UK, then that's going to make it more expensive and difficult to ramp up if we get a different colour or a different policy in the next government who like the rest of the world sees that rail is the future, that it's not just about cars. But I think, as say, you'll know more about this Debs, about the decision on HS2, about actually, and this brings it back to Liam's focus on climate resilience, is that by not building phase 2, we're actually losing some of our climate resilience by not upgrading and building a new network.
Well, we're losing that. We're losing capacity, because obviously that was the main reason that HS2 was being built, was to increase capacity on the network. So that's kind of gone, and that then was going to release freight paths. And as that article that I referred to, mentioned, there's no kind of clear indication of where that's going to come from. So it feels like there's a real kind of, I think there's a sense now of within the rail industry, I get the sense that people are kind of, I think people have felt really, really deflated and upset and angry about some of the government's decisions. And I don't want to get into, I'm not getting into the politics here, but I'm just, some of those decisions are not particularly strategic decisions, and where of course costs are really important, and it's really we're in a really difficult environment at the moment. Treasury is is the government department that sort of has the kind of final say in all of this
It's
kind of
difficult.
spend decisions, and it is difficult, but it's really incumbent on us to keep making the case for rail in this country, because I think we're in danger otherwise of just losing our grip on an industry that's always been, and that then is removing the confidence within the industry to go out and sell their wares elsewhere. Because let's face it, at the moment we're not we're not looking great from an outsider looking in, are we? As an industry that can't even build our own piece of high speed, relatively small piece of high speed.
I have a question for Liam. Based on the decisions are being made, do you think data is being used effectively to make these decisions?
No, because I don't think data. Sorry, clarify that. Data, which is data that's being generated from the current network and stuff. No, I don't think it is. Evidence, that would be a Deb question, but I'm not entirely sure some of the decisions are being made evidence based.
Well, no, I don't think they're being. I certainly don't think that the decision to curtail HS2 was an evidence-based decision. Really, I mean, it was a decision that was allegedly based on the spiraling costs. But that's, again, I don't want to rerun old arguments, but the costs were, the government were controlling the cost. They're in charge of the project, and it's this flip-flopping around and changing scope over the last sort of 5 or 6 years of that project that has contributed significantly to the cost of the project. But I do think there's other issues here, like, we've been looking at things like the Green Book, which was, obviously helps sort of make the case for rail and other infrastructure. And I think, there's a real, I think there's a lot of arguments to say that we should be looking at things very differently, because I think, if you think about climate resilience, the importance of building climate resilient infrastructure and all of that. If you look at the importance of getting people out of their cars where possible and getting, investing in a more kind of a better connected public sector transport system, then the kind of equations that are used in the Green Book, for example, are not particularly helpful. It's like, basing something on existing passenger numbers, for example, is not very useful. If you want to encourage people onto rail, then you've got to obviously build it to get people on there, for example, So I think that the whole investment argument needs to be flipped around to talk about the environmental, social benefits of having a well-connected, not just rail, but well-connected transport, which includes rail.
Yeah, and it's not just for the climate resilience piece. I've had people come to us for anecdotes or insight into this, and it is also the fact that the network is getting less reliable because over the last 2 weeks there's been all those storms, and so the solution seems to be just stop all operations, which I don't think you're going to be able to do if we're having these storms more intensively in years. But what data can we use to either predict the impact or fix the bits that are going to be most affected? Because I think we're just assuming that all of the land's going to landslip and all.
Well, also to risk assess. If you use data to look at, I don't know, for example, vulnerable areas that are vulnerable to flooding, landslides, extreme temperatures, all that sort of thing, which all has an impact, then obviously you can prioritize bits of, you can prioritize where you upgrade, you can prioritize where you change sort of critical bits of the railway or what have you, based on sort of risk severity. You can use all that predictive analysis, which is stuff that our good friends at One Big Circle, give them a shout out, that all of that stuff, networks of sensors that monitor environmental conditions, collecting all that real-time data, all of that sort of thing is all, it's all part of the, it's all part of the picture, isn't it? Using machine learning algorithms to identify patterns, I mean, I'm not, as you can probably tell, I'm not an expert, but
yes, it can,
all that stuff is out there.
I think the important thing is to say this is not just for rail. It is large parts of the country were cut off entirely during the last few floodings.
Yeah.
The roads were cut off as well as the railways. So we can't just have situations where whole towns and villages are just cut off every time it rains. And we need to use.
I would kind of caveat that a bit as well, is because yeah, and this is where I think, I would like to learn more, and and particularly if anybody's listening to this and would like to come and do a podcast on this, because I think Scotland, from a transport point of view, is probably a lot more resilient than maybe England is. And and this is the wrong thing to say on a rail podcast, but Bear Scotland are very good at keeping the roads open. And I'd be, and I really would be interested to learn, what, if any of that learning could be brought to rail. And I know roads are a lot simpler, but they've had experiences where roads have, with all the weather, the rain, they've just disappeared and they've had to rebuild them. They've done that, really, really quickly. They've kept things moving on, and like gritters are going all the time because obviously we get frost as well. So, so this year we've had floods, we've had lots of rain, we've had high winds, we've had, snow, ice, everything has been thrown, sort of like, at the Highlands. But I think the road hit by me, the A9, has been closed twice. Once because, at the highest point, where there was an unexpected, the snow came in too quickly, basically. So it was closed overnight, and loads of cars got trapped. And then there was, because of the rain, it was flooded quite close to me, but it was only closed for about 10 hours or something, but in comparison, I've not counted the days, but the railway line here has been closed at least in double figures in the same period. And some of that has been, as your point, about, the decision is made just to close it. And I think, for ScotRail to do that, it's quite an easy decision to do, because they can, because they have the flexibility of ramping the services up and down. But what that actually does mean is that we lose our direct service to London, or to other places, and that's quite serious in some ways, because you don't just lose it for one day when they cancel it, you actually lose it for 3 days. You lose it either side, because you lose it going north, the day before, and then you lose it going south the day after. So it's not just a 1 day cancellation if they decide to close the route down. So sometimes, and then obviously strikes are another thing, but sometimes you can go a week without a direct London service. But the
Yeah.
Caledonian Sleeper don't seem to have the same issues.
I would say also that I think you were talking about the Green Book earlier. Other things will be affected by climate change in future as well, particularly people's tolerance to stand on platforms. If it's going to be raining more, then people active travel again. If we're having more winter storms, then we have to assume that it's more difficult to get people cycling in winter. And it kind of all this climate stuff just pushes people more towards cars. Warm, cozy cars.
Well, but it is the reliability as well.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is the reliability. And if you talk, I mean, I think we seem to have got into this really horrible situation in the UK where everyone just sort of thinks the railways are a bit of a joke. It's like, oh, well, just sort of use the trains as a last resort. They probably won't be running, but ha, 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 I know that's a bit of a
I'm not running today.
simplification, but we've had there's been a lot of problems on the railways. The strikes haven't helped, and I think people's sort of perceptions of the railway are pretty bad, really. And to be honest, I think people working in the industry's perceptions are pretty bad as well, not helped by the government, doing things like, cancelling one of the biggest projects that rail has.
I think that comes back to your earlier point, though, Deb, about saying that it's hit people, and I think it's demotivating, isn't it, to
It's
see
extremely
an
demotivating.
industry that we've all put, sort of like a lot of effort and hard work into because we believe in it, and we believe in public transport and infrastructure to move people around, and and the fact that it is an enabler, and yet it does feel like a bit of a kick in the teeth, doesn't it?
Well, it does really, and I think it's extremely unhelpful to pit, which I mean, again, I know I seem to be constantly slating the government. Apologies, but it feels a bit like the latest decision on HS2 has really pitted the kind of it's obviously a again being moved into the political sphere, pitting roads against rail, which again I think is really, really unhelpful because let's be honest, we're a sophisticated, developed country in the UK. We're despite what the government are telling us about, you know, our dire economic sort of state. We are a wealthy country, so for us to be told basically that we can either have roads that haven't got loads of potholes in or decent railway seems to me to be an
Yeah, and
absolute
that's
disgrace, really, because
that's
we don't.
interesting.
You know, it shouldn't be an either or. And I speak as somebody that is obviously a passionate believer in rail, but equally, you know, I own a car, I use my car. Why should I expect to be driving around on roads that have got massive great potholes and are almost undrivable? I don't want that either. I want to be able to use my car sometimes when I need to, and I want to be able to get on a really good rail network when I want to and when I need to. And that, you know, I think it's so unhelpful to be politically pitting those two, you know, those two parts of the transport system against
Well,
each other.
well, I think that really gets to the heart of the problem, though, isn't it? That it is there's too much politics in transport, and really these should be about pure economic decisions about enabling people to, you know, to have choice, to be able to get to work, to access, you know, hospitals, work, whatever it is, in the right method of transport.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, look at the numbers for leisure travel that have gone up, you know, particularly since COVID. I mean, they're going up before COVID, but, you know, now they've kind of jumped again, really. You know, people do still want to use the railways. I mean, it might just be because, as somebody said to me the other day, because we all love a drink in the UK. So we like to get out and be able to get on the railway to have a drink. Well, whatever, you know, but the fact that leisure travel is going up can only be a positive, surely. And we need to kind of hang on to that. And
But I think
yeah,
that's interesting about the leisure, though, isn't it? Because I was reading something this morning about trends in 2024, and I think there is a trend that is the Taylor Swift effect, isn't it? That people travel, you know, because they're doing leisure or something. You know, they're going to a sporting event or they're going to a concert, and people are increasingly going longer distance to do that. So you don't necessarily go to the place where your local is. You're sort of like turning it into a whole sort of like experience. So you might go to the concert, but you might actually visit the city, and, you know, and do other leisure activities at the same time, and that's part of the trend. And that's, you know,
yeah,
and rail should be capitalizing from that, really, shouldn't we?
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely, we should.
Yeah.
So it's that type of data trends as well that we should be looking at, as though, you know, not just about, you know, what's happening in rail, but also about what other things influence our reasons for travel.
Yes,
So are those data sets that we need to be encouraging people to provide them?
yeah, they are.
Is it for people to provide them, or is it for rail to see, you know, rail to seek them out, or even, you know, government officials to seek them out to make the case for rail?
Well, it surely needs to be part of the thinking when you're making a business case for a new service, new line, whatever it might be. I mean, I remember looking at some work I did work for Green Gauge 21 ages and ages ago, like looking at the case for reinstating that railway between am I going to get it right, Exeter and Oakhampton.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the social issues around that area, for example, you know, um, there's a lot of looked after children in that area. There's a lot of children that are not in what they call NEETs, not in education or employment. There's some quite deprived areas basically along that route. Interestingly, because everyone thinks of the southwest as being sort of a wealthy sort of place. Um, and you know, we looked at loads of evidence around things like why young people weren't taking up training opportunities who weren't in work or in education, and then mostly it was because they couldn't get anywhere. You know,
Yeah.
they were being offered training places to go and do some training, and they physically just couldn't get to those places because there's no decent transport, or not decent, there's no transport.
Now that
Similarly,
reminds
older
me.
people, you know, because of the way the hospitals are, you know, they couldn't get to appointments, blah blah blah. So there's all those kind of social aspects to having good transport links that need to be brought into the arguments for making the case. I think that aren't, as far as I can see at the moment.
That reminds me of an interesting report that Transport for North brought out yesterday, which is about the social exclusion in north of England. But I think what's quite interesting about this report is, it comes to, your point of that is that some of the biggest deprivation and, and poorest transport links are in coastal towns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting report. Liam, I'm just going to pop it in the chat, so like when you send things out, you can link to it if you like.
Yes, thanks. Will do. I should say that we just had an impromptu tour of your house as well earlier. You walked around the
Oh,
whole.
it was because I was as you know, I have cats, and they were invading the space. So I was chucking them out.
Right. So, also, just before we sum up, is for the year ahead, we have 3 events already booked in. 13th of March in London, 16th of April in London, and the 6th of June is going to be our summer barbecue in Bristol. So look onto those and we'll see you there. And then we're at various conferences which will be advertised as they come along. But yes, that's generally what we're going to be talking about, is using data, and abroad.
Abroad. And we should do
Inspired
a
by
little shout
John.
out to say that the Rail Innovation Group is always looking for new members. So if you're interested in finding out more, then look on our website.
And you get
Good
to
sales pitch.
And you what?
And you get to talk to us more
Exactly. I mean, what could be better for you?
when you come back. When are you coming back from Portugal?
Next week.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yes.
Missed you.
Ah, yeah. I'm back next week. We're doing an apprentice event up in Crewe. So I've got to be back for that. That's on Tuesday, I think. So I'm back next Monday evening. And then I'm headed straight up to Crewe for
Valentine's Day.
it's a women only event. This one, it's for our high speed apprentices who wanted an event that was just with female apprentices and female senior people in the industry to kind of come together and do
Oh, that's interesting.
professional networking. So yeah, it's been really. We've had such a great response. We've had to close the registration because we just oversubscribed now, really. So yeah, we've got some really good West Coast Partnership are supporting it. Shamit Geiger's coming along to do some mentoring, and Alstom are hosting us at their factory up in Crewe. We've got lots of senior women from right across construction and rail coming to sort of have informal mentoring sessions with. We've got about 30 female apprentices from, again, right across different companies, different roles. So it's really good. Really looking forward to it, actually. It's the first one of these kind of things that we've done, but we felt that despite it, obviously it's not an inclusive event because it is just for women, but we felt, we could make the case for it because there are, most of the people that are early in their careers in rail and infrastructure that are women are often sort of in the minority at whatever professional events and things that they go to, and they all find that quite challenging, I think, sometimes as young women. So we thought we could make the case for having it as a kind of female only space.
Is that why they asked for it to be?
That's why they asked for it. They
Because
particularly asked
they
for it.
find, yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, they felt that it would build their confidence, and they wanted to hear from senior women about how they had experienced the industry when they were kind of starting out and all of those kind of things. And they felt that they would be more comfortable in an environment where it was just women, which I
I think it'd be interesting to do a podcast on sort of like just that as a theme.
Yeah.
Once you've had your event and how, and maybe how that makes, a different event, a different style event, a different feel about it.
Yeah, it will be a very different event. It will be the first event I've ever been to that's a rail event that has got no men in it. That's for sure. Not that I'm being anti-man. Of course I am not. But, we all know, we've all worked in rail for a long time, and we all know that it's a very kind of male-dominated industry. Not as much as it used to be. It's obviously improving all the time, but still it is. So the more we can do to encourage women to kind of not just come into the industry, but move up in the industry, which I think is probably where more of an issue. So that's some of the stuff that we'll be exploring with the with the senior women that we've got coming along. So yeah, it's good. Looking
Right.
forward to it.
Well, let us know next time.
I will report back.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Good to
Thanks.
see
See you
you.
later. Bye.
See you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.
Until next time.